Welcome to the March 24th, 2025 episode of The Energy Show. I'm energy journalist Markham Hislop, and the working title for today's show is Danielle Smith and Ben Shapiro Selling the Alberta Myth in the Good Old USA. And for those of you who don't know, Smith is headed down to Florida on Thursday, and that's tomorrow. And that evening, she's going to be speaking at a fundraiser actually be interviewed by Shapiro, at a fundraiser for PragerU, which is not a university at all. It's kind of a disinformation mill, and it promotes things like freedom and liberty and all that kind of stuff. Very MAGA oriented, as Shapiro. But Shapiro's very, very popular down there. He's not Joe Rogan, but he's in that stratosphere. Okay, so Canadians don't like Shapiro. I mean, he's called us a silly country back in January, just as an example of the kind of insults we get from this guy. He said he replied to former Premier Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and he said, "When we take Canada, you will be expelled to Panama to work the canal." Really? Seriously? That's, for somebody of his stature, that's just kind of silly. Okay, so there's been a lot of controversy in Alberta and Canada in general about this because every time Danielle Smith has opened her mouth in the last little while, she has gotten Pierre Poilievre, this Conservative Party of Canada leader, in hot water. And because she goes down there and she says, I asked the Trump administration if they would just hold off on the tariffs, till the election was over because what they were doing was favoring the liberals. That asking a foreign government to do something to affect the general election that's going on in Canada, you could imagine the outrage. People are not happy. And frankly, the CPC is in a nosedive. 2 months ago, if you'd asked, everybody would have said Pierre Poilievre is going to be the next prime minister, hands down. And then Trudeau stepped down. Mark Carney was chosen as the Liberal leader. He now becomes the prime minister. He called an election on a couple of days ago. And the CPC is in free fall. At this point, it looks like a majority Liberal, assuming the campaign goes like this. So all eyes are on Danielle Smith. What outrageous thing is she going to say down in Florida to Ben Shapiro? Well, I can tell you what she's going to be talking about. She's going to be talking about Trump tariffs and oil and gas. And how do I know that? Because she keeps flooding my inbox with press releases. The Alberta government just press releases about what a wonderful job she's going to do going down. She's going to sell Alberta and so on. And in order to understand, I'm going to provide some context here going into this interview because you're going to read or hear or watch the video of this interview, and you need context. And so that's what this show is about. Context for that interview, and then maybe tomorrow or Friday we'll talk about the interview itself, what was said, and what was the reaction to it. So Alberta, which is absolutely dominated by the oil and gas industry. Now, remember, Canada is the fourth largest oil producer in the world, fifth largest gas producer, and the epicenter of all of that is in Alberta. Even most of the companies that are producing in Newfoundland or in Saskatchewan, they're headquartered in Alberta. Okay, so Alberta is the Houston it's the Texas of Canada from that point of view, and the Alberta has this myth. And the myth is that it has been hard done by the federal government in Ottawa, and for a whole variety of things have come and gone. But what it really does, it pines for the good old days. And what happened is between the late 90s and 2014, there was a huge capital boom in Alberta when they were building the oil sands. And hundreds of billions of dollars were invested in northern Alberta to build the oil sands because producing bitumen is not like producing light sweet crude. You don't drill a well bore and stick your pump down there and with a pump jack and pump it up. You don't do that. You either have a mine, in which case, because this stuff's like peanut butter. It's sand and hydrocarbons and a whole bunch of other stuff mixed up together. So you either have a mine or you have what's called steam-assisted gravity drainage, where you basically kind of soften up the bitumen underground with steam and to get it out. And they're about equal in terms of their production. And total production, 3.2 million barrels a day. So the thing is, all of that there was a boom in Alberta for 15, 20 years that was out of this world. I mean, there were a lot of fortunes made. If you go out in the northwest of Calgary, and especially in new neighborhoods like Elbow Valley and places like that, and you see the McMansions, there are plenty of $4 and $5 million houses in Calgary that were, and the reason they were made is because oil company executives, middle managers even, were taking home millions of dollars in bonuses and cashing out their stock that they had during this boom. So there are a lot of people in Alberta who were made rich or very comfortable during this boom, and they want it back. And why do they want it back? Because starting in late 2014, basically to shut down the American shale producers, the Saudis, well, OPEC basically, turned opened up the taps. And of course, when you produce more oil, then and there was an oversupply of about a million and a half, maybe even 2 million barrels a day, prices went down. And I mean, they plummeted, they crashed. And so poor old Alberta, 2015 and 2016 were tough years. They were, the price I think got down. Western Canada Select was like $23 or something. Nobody's making money at that. They're all losing money. So there were some tough years. 2017 comes along. Oh, this is great. We're going to make some money. And then in 2018, I think it was early 2018, there was a leak on the Keystone pipeline, and they had to, I think it was stopped for a while, and then they had to reduce the flow. And so you couldn't send as much oil, and it got so bad that for most of 2019, the Alberta government had to actually curtail production. So then, you couldn't produce as much, and that was a bad year. And they get through 2019, and then 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic starts, and we get into 2020 is a horrible year. 2021 starts to recover. 2022, and then 2023 and 20, they come down again. Conventional side really fell off, and the oil sands came down somewhat less. But my point here is that the last decade has been very bumpy for Alberta for the oil and gas industry. It's had a few good years, like 2022, I think was a record year, but it's had lots of bad. Who do they blame for that? Do they blame COVID? Do they blame international oil prices? No, 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 no. There's a huge victim mentality in Alberta. And first started with ironically, Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, back in 1980 with the National Energy Program. 45 years later, and people are still angry about the NEP, as they call it. And they've been thinking of themselves as victims. And so what they want is they want to get out of our way. We think that there's going to be a huge, like the golden age of hydrocarbons out to at least 2050. And if you just get out of our way, take your tariffs off, build us some pipelines, build us some LNG, do all that kind of stuff, and we'll be wealthy beyond. It'll be crazy. It'll be a boom like to rival the 2000 to 2014 boom. And Trump's not cooperating, and apparently, the federal government hasn't done what they want to do. This is so bad that and you go back to the March 20th Energy Show episode where I talked about the March 18th open letter by 14 oil and gas CEOs to the federal government. They asked the federal government to use all available emergency powers to trample the rights of Canadians so that there would be no opposition to pipelines and LNG plants, and then they could expedite them, construction, so they could take advantage of this boom that they think is coming. And you'll see what I thought of that. The Emergency Act used to be called the War Measures Act. That tells you a lot about what this thing is used for. It's used for extreme emergencies like the COVID-19 pandemic. If you're invaded, if you're at war, those kinds of things. That's what it's meant for. It's not meant to be used because you're inconvenienced by, federal regulations or whatever it might be, and you can now suddenly use the power of the Canadian government to just wipe away your opposition and steamroller all of these projects. It's not meant for that. And the fact that they would even ask for that is outrageous, as I made the point in the March 20th episode. Okay, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Um, all the years I moved to Calgary, Joanne and I, my wife, and who's a partner in Energy Media and our videographer, we moved to Calgary in 2000. I worked 5 years in the oil and gas industry, and 17 years ago, we've been around 17 years. We got into the online news business because Joe comes out of the TV industry. I'm an old print reporter. So, so we've been having this conversation about energy in Alberta for a long, long time. And I've talked to thousands of people. I've debated them online. I've gone and presented to industry associations. I've on and on and on. I've had these kind of conversations. And in the last 5 or 6 years, since we really picked up and started working on the energy transition, here's an observation. I have never met a single person in Alberta, not an economist, not an oil CEO, not a trade association, nothing, who could make an evidence-based argument for what was going on with the global energy system. Now, I say, I mean, the evidence very clearly shows that we're in a transition to clean energy technologies and things are being electrified, like transportation. That will then, probably around 2030, begin to affect demand for oil. There are big changes coming. You wouldn't know it in Alberta. I swear to God, not one person, not one could come and say, could quote a report and say, "Hey, I read OPEC, World Oil Outlook 2050 and 2045, and all the modeling, and here are the assumptions, and let's talk about that, and here's why Alberta think." No, the narrative, yes, the the narrative that comes out of OPEC, the narrative that comes out of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, they've got those talking points down pat. If you ask them, show me the math. Show me the evidence, the data that backs up your argument. Trust me, they can't do it. Not a one of them. And this is the problem. Alberta is looking to the energy future and misguided by OPEC's modeling, which says that there's going to be a big increase in oil demand by 2050. It's not going to happen. But that's grist for another episode. But in order to, when they look to the future, they think that it's going to be just like the past, and they'll talk about this all the time. That the energy, the past, all the energy that we're going to require because of the rise of the global south. So we're talking about Latin America, Africa, big parts of Asia, and so on. The increase in demand for energy over the next 25 years will more than offset the declines that are coming in the global north. So in China and in Europe and Australia and North America and so on. And they're absolutely committed to that. Have they read the modeling? No, none of them. I have read both those reports and other modeling. I know the data. I can make their argument for them and then argue the other side. It's just crazy. I feel like a lawyer. But anyway, you have to understand this context because Smith is their public champion. She's going down there to say, if you just got out of our way, we would have a boom in our industry to rival, it would exceed any other boom that we've ever had. And we deserve this, and we need it, and we need to take advantage of this. Get out of the way. What needs to happen here is this conversation is it's like a funhouse beer. You look at it and you think, okay, here's the data, here's the evidence, here's the modeling, here's the expert opinion, so on. This all makes a whole lot of sense. You can have a discussion about it. We don't all have to agree because we're talking about the future, right? Nobody knows exactly how the future is going to play out. We talk about trends. That's fair game. But when you hear Smith talk or any of the oil CEOs or the business community in Alberta, it's a funhouse beer. It all looks distorted. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's not what the evidence says. That's not what the data says. It's not what the modeling says. Come back to reality. You're looking to the past where it did happen like that. Like literally between the 1960s and roughly today, $500 billion of capital was poured into the Alberta oil and gas industry. That's a lot of money. And it's fueled a huge expansion in oil and gas production in Alberta, and fortunes, many fortunes were made. You want to know why Alberta has far and away the highest per capita income in Canada? That's why. It was a huge boom. And I know many people who, have done very well and they want it back in the worst way. And they're not getting it back. That's the problem. Changes are coming by 2030, early 2030s at the latest, and it is completely and utterly ignored. Completely ignored. And I could give you all sorts of evidence for it, but take that again, grist for another episode. I'll explain it then. But unless you understand the Smith's approach to this, why she's doing it, how she sees the energy industry, because she's called for the oil production to double in Alberta. It'd be like from 4 million to 8 million barrels a day, which would put Alberta right up there with let's say just below Russia and Saudi Arabia. That's how powerful Alberta would be. Well, if you're sitting in Alberta and you're Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, and you're the oil and gas CEOs, and you have a chance to be up there with Russia and the Saudis, power and money, that's a powerful drug. But it's not grounded in reality anymore. It was not even 10 years. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when all of these folks were in the prime of their career or beginning their career, that's what they remember and they want it back in the worst way. And she's going to go down to Ben Shapiro and she's going to have a national audience. And this is what she says. If you criticize me for going down there, you have to talk to the influencers in the US if you want to get people to change their mind about the tariffs. I can see the logic, and under different circumstances, might make sense, but not these circumstances. Until Albertans open up their eyes, pay attention, actually read some reports, please. Let's go read some data. International Energy Agency, Rystad, S&P Global, Bloomberg NEF. You email me, I'll send you the links. Until they do that, they are completely deluded because the future they think they're going to get is not the future they're really going to get. And so all of this posturing, all of these demands, all of these, hair on fire press releases are not going to get them where they need to go. So when you're watch this episode and then watch the episode tomorrow or maybe Friday after we've seen the fallout from the interview with Ben Shapiro, and we'll see if I'm right, and that's in fact what she did. And I think I'd bet a chicken dinner on this one.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.